The Tigers miss on their top quarterback target. So who's next? We've got a name. It's locked on LSU. Here we go.
You are Locked On LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Okay, let's get it. It is Locked On LSU, your team every day. I'm your host, Matt Moscona. Thanks so much for making us your first listen. We are free, available wherever you get podcasts, of course, on YouTube as well. So please subscribe. As always, one of the fastest ways to help us grow is by leaving your comments below. So thank you so much for that. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. It was a massive recruiting weekend for LSU, the final weekend before the 2-month-long dead period. LSU had a couple of 5-stars on campus, one committed, actually 3 5-stars, a couple committed, and an uncommitted 5-star as well. We'll tell you how those visits went and the significance and all that. But we got to start with some disappointing news on the recruiting front for LSU. For several months now, we've talked about Bowe Bentley, a 4-star quarterback out of Salina, Texas. He was the highest remained uncommitted quarterback in the country. I said was because over the weekend, Bowe Bentley picked among his final 2, which were Oklahoma and LSU. And you probably guessed it. While we were all watching LSU push their way to a baseball national championship, Bowe Bentley picked Oklahoma. So where does LSU go from here? Of course, every week we talk with our friend Shay Dixon from On 3 The Bengal Tiger, who in my book is the best when it comes to the recruiting scene in and around LSU. Nobody more connected than Shay, more informed and better, in my opinion. And so we asked Shay why, first of all, Bowe Bentley picked Oklahoma over LSU.
I mean, OU had been circled as the team from the start that he was highest on. He grew up in the area of Texas where there's a lot of Sooner fans, and he was one of them. Their kind of household was one of them. But we're talking about a kid who didn't start until his junior year of high school this past fall. So his recruitment didn't really blow up until January, really, February, and when he started to kind of reel in some really big offers off that season. And that played into LSU's hands, at least, because when Bryce Underwood leaves you at the altar in the 11th hour and you do go and sign a portal quarterback, a starter out of the SEC in Michael Bay and Beaver out of state, you don't want to go, and skip another class back-to-back of high school recruiting. That's not ideal after not signing anyone in December. So they sort of latched on to Bentley, and they went from part of a huge group all the way down to kind of the team that was always the team to beat, OU, and then LSU. And he gave them back-to-back officials, and I don't know, Matt, it just felt like the further out we got from the 2 officials that things were probably going to come back to where they started for Bentley, and that was OU as, like I said, the team to beat. So it wasn't a big surprise when he picked OU. I think more so it's, okay, where does LSU go from here? Because, again, you don't want to skip back-to-back, high school recruiting.
And that is absolutely the next question is, where does LSU go from here? And Shay's right. Listen, I've often joked that there's never been a bad official visit. I mean, you're a high schooler and you get to go to these elite level colleges with the great facilities and the coaches, and you're eating free meals and you're staying on campus and everybody's putting their best foot forward to recruit you. Of course, it's a great time. No one's ever had a bad official visit. So sometimes guys get caught up in the emotion, and Bowe Bentley certainly had a great visit to LSU. There's no denying that. But you heard Shay say it. The further you got removed from the OV and the emotion, you settle down and you let logic and all of your criteria factor in, you make your pick. And for Bowe Bentley, it was Oklahoma. So what is next for LSU? Well, as Shay told us, LSU did actually, after they missed out on Bowe Bentley, they did offer another quarterback for 2026.
Well, they went ahead and offered Bryson Beaver, who is a 4-star, pretty fast riser, tore up the Elite 11, made Oregon and Ole Miss visits in recent weeks. But in the past few weeks, LSU and other schools had been in talks with Beaver. And for LSU, it was, hey, look, if things don't work out with Bowe Bentley, who do we pivot to? And Beaver officially picked up his offer in the time since Bentley committed to OU on Friday. So they've got the new offer out. But, again, we're in a 2-month-long dead period now. So the goal is to get a kid to say, hey, look, I'm going to wait until I can make a visit and kind of do things beyond Zoom calls with the staff and all of that, because there's no in-person contact allowed. And if he does wait, well, then LSU's very much in the picture. And I almost think, look, Auburn offered, other offers are starting to roll in. If more offers come in, does he press pause and say, hey, let me look beyond Oregon and Ole Miss, who, yes, he was on Oregon's campus this past weekend, but that was his first visit there. So, again, a guy who's kind of blown up later in the process. Does he allow that to continue to play out is the big question. And then after that, it's, hey, does, this staff and Joe Sloan try to go flip a guy who, you play that out during the season, but it's the NIL era. We don't know what happens with these teams in the fall. We don't know about coaching changes. We don't know if a team goes and adds a portal quarterback that leaves, your incoming quarterback a little uneasy at the high school level. So I still think this one could go a few different ways depending on what Beaver does and then ultimately kind of how the fall plays out for LSU and other teams.
How the fall plays out is going to be fascinating as well, because we all know that Garrett Nussmeier will be the starter. But after that, is it Van Buren? Is it Colin Hurley? Who's still here? It's a lot of balls up in the air there, which I want to get to here in just a quick second, talking about sort of the future of the quarterback position. But Shay mentioned Bryson Beaver, 6'3", 195 pounds. We'll familiarize ourselves now with him. He's out of California. He is not committed anywhere presently. And as Shay mentioned, he does have offers from some top teams. He is thought to be a heavy lean to Oregon. As a matter of fact, the On3 prediction machine has him 99.1% to the Ducks. Ole Miss has offered, Alabama has offered, LSU, Boise, Auburn, and then some smaller schools, Nevada, San Jose State, Northern Arizona, Florida Atlantic. So you've got that group of elite schools that have offered, and LSU is trying to get in the mix now. But what Shay said there is appropriate. The key is, with a 2-month-long dead period, can you get Bryson Beaver to hold off on making a commitment somewhere so that he can visit LSU whenever that dead period is lifted and can come on campus? But it is critical that LSU signs a quarterback in this class, because if not, they leave themselves in a terribly precarious situation, which I want to dive into next. And actually, it kind of dovetails into something I wanted to talk about with Michael Van Buren anyway. So we're talking quarterbacks and the future of that position at LSU, and I'll draw a correlation to something that happened in LSU's not too distant past. We're going to get to that here in just a second as we continue here. It is Locked on LSU, your team every day. Guys, you probably heard of Viagra or Cialis. Maybe you've even tried them. But if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to get Rugiet Ready. Rugiet Ready is a next-gen prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost blood flow. Unlike the usual pills that can take hours, Rugiet's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue and kicks in fast, on average in 15 minutes. Effects can last up to 36 hours, so you can stay confident and in control when the moment is right. If traditional options haven't worked, Rugiet might be the answer. Over 150,000 men have already made the switch. So head to Rugiet.com/LockedOnCollege and use code LockedOnCollege to get 15% off today. That's RUGIET.com/LockedOnCollege and use the promo code LockedOnCollege for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, or manufacturing review. Please visit the Rugiet website for full safety information. So as we're talking about Bowe Bentley picking Oklahoma and LSU really being in a bit of a lurch here at quarterback for 2026, I ran across a piece over at CBS Sports, and this is just a list, and it's not necessarily anything than a leaping off point for this conversation, but it kind of reminded me of the situation LSU is in right now. So CBS Sports put out a list because it's list season, and it's what college football writers do in June and July when teams haven't yet, when spring practice is over and teams haven't reported yet for fall camp. Well, they listed the 10 best backup quarterbacks in college football for 2025. And when you know it, the number one player on the list is LSU quarterback Michael Van Buren. And they write, Van Buren flew under the radar while starting 8 games as a true freshman at Mississippi State last season, but he did show some real potential as a future SEC star. He completed 54.7% of his passes with 7 interceptions, but those numbers are expected in a first-year quarterback starting in one of the most competitive conferences in the nation. Then they stack up Michael Van Buren against DJ Lagway. Both were freshmen in the SEC. Both played about the same number of snaps, and their numbers are really comparable. For example, Lagway from Florida, 1,915 passing yards. Van Buren, 1,886. They were basically separated by about 30 yards, thereabouts. This is pretty incredible. Passing touchdowns, Lagway 12, Van Buren 11. Interceptions, Lagway 9, Van Buren 7. Rushing touchdowns, Lagway none, Van Buren 5. Very comparable numbers, yet DJ Lagway presently over at FanDuel has the 8th best Heisman odds. The 8th best Heisman odds. What are we missing? Well, Lagway was a 5-star. We've talked about DJ Lagway since he was, early in his high school career because he exploded and was a 5-star and the number 1 quarterback and went to Florida and all that stuff. Michael Van Buren was the number 385 prospect nationally. So when you're DJ Lagway and you're a freshman playing, people tend to excuse the mistakes because you're a freshman and they are wowed by the upside. When you're Michael Van Buren, you just have an awful lot to prove. Lower floor, potentially Lagway higher ceiling, if you want to put it that way. But the QB future at LSU is really interesting because, we know Nussmeier is going to be your starter here in 2025. You brought in Van Buren as a quality, experienced backup, and you've got Colin Hurley as well. But you didn't sign a quarterback in the 2025 class. So going into 2026, you're losing Nuss, and in theory, you would return both Van Buren and Hurley, although they're the same class. Would they both return in 2026 together? Remains to be seen. But after that, remember, you don't have a prospect from 2025, and you presently don't have a high school signee for 2026. You're certainly not going into 2026 with only 2 quarterbacks, even if it is Van Buren and Hurley. You're going to have somebody else there. And what if Van Buren beats out Colin Hurley in the spring, or Hurley sees the writing on the wall, and then he transfers? Well, all of a sudden now, this looks a lot like what happened in 2018. Let me jog your memory if you don't remember. So in 2016, LSU signed Lindsey Scott. He was at LSU for 1 year and left. In 2017, they signed Miles Brennan. And we know Brennan's long history at LSU, and he was beset by injuries, unfortunately. In 2018, they did not sign a high school quarterback. They got in late on James Foster, and he ultimately ended up picking Texas A&M. And so you did not sign a high school quarterback in 2018, so you got a transfer after spring, Joe Burrow. And then you remember what happened is that Burrow won the job in fall camp, and so both Lowell Narcisse and Justin McMillan transferred out. And so you were left with only Joe Burrow and second-year Miles Brennan, who they were trying to redshirt. So it was imperative that they kept Burrow healthy so you could retain or maintain that year of eligibility for Miles Brennan. And they made it through by the hardest, but they made it through with just those 2. And then in 2019, they signed Peter Parrish. So you went basically a half a decade without signing a quality quarterback in the high school class. Then subsequently, you had TJ Finley and Garrett Nussmeier. And we saw Mac was Finley and Max Johnson, then Nussmeier in 2021. And so since then, you've kicked. But the point being, Joe Burrow in many ways saved you because he provided that bridge to be able to recruit behind him. And ultimately, you ended up going in the portal again with Jaden Daniels when you needed to. But you're looking at something very similar right now because in 2023, you signed Ricky Collins. Well, he's no longer on campus. In 2024, you signed Colin Hurley. You did not sign a quarterback in 25, and now you're dangerously close to not getting one in 26 as well. So basically, in 3 of those 4 years right now, as it stands, you didn't get a quarterback, and the only one is Hurley, who we'll see if he remains. The future for LSU at quarterback is very likely in the transfer portal if they can provide a bridge to 2027. Because 2027 is really the one that we need to be looking at. So, 2027 is a bumper crop in Louisiana. And as we look at it at quarterback, but as we look at it, you got to get there. So a best case scenario for LSU would be Michael Van Buren sits behind Garrett Nussmeier in 2025, stays healthy, returns in 2026, and is a really good starter, and then maybe even starts in 2027 as a senior and allowing whichever quarterback you sign in 2027 one sort of year to get their feet wet, and then that player starts in 28, and then you've reset. That's probably a best case scenario. But even still, you've left yourself dangerously thin with your depth by not getting quarterbacks in the high school class in 2025 and now potentially in 2026 as well, which means you may have no other option but to go back in the portal and get a player like AJ Swan to provide depth in 2026. So that way, even if both Van Buren or Hurley are there, if you don't sign a high school player, you're still going to need a third. So maybe it's a plan where you go look in the portal and do effectively what you just did with Michael Van Buren. You try to get a bridge player that can give you depth now and then maybe start in 2027 potentially. So when you look at 27, remember, this is the one that is a year kind of unlike we've seen in Louisiana. Elijah Haven is the number one quarterback in the country. He's out of Dunham in Baton Rouge. Peyton Houston is the number 8 quarterback in the country. He's out of Evangel. And then Malachi Ziegler is the number 9 quarterback in the country. He's out of Benton. So you've got those 3 quarterbacks from Louisiana for 2027, all in the top 9 in the country at their position. And then there's also Colton Nussmeier, Garrett's younger brother, who's coming out of Texas, who is also a 2027 quarterback. So among those 4, you got to feel good about getting at least one. Now, it's a long way to go until December of 2026, December 26, when the 27 class are signing. But long way to go, but you got to get one of those guys. You get one of those 4, and in theory, you reset from 27 for the next 4 years, and you can start to build beyond that. But it's a very uncomfortable spot to be in. It's not altogether unfamiliar, and it's not something that you are unable to overcome because of how much is available annually in the portal if you have the resources and are willing to spend, which LSU is. But still, you got to hope Nussmeier has a great year, and then Van Buren stays healthy, and can be your bridge into 2027. But Bowe Bentley will be an Oklahoma Sooner. The name to know now is Bryson Beaver out of California, the next target for LSU for the class of 2026. There were 3 5-stars on LSU's campus for the Bayou Splash this weekend. We'll let you hear how their visits went as we continue Locked on LSU, your team every day. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track your accounts, investments, and spending all in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. If you share your finances with someone, Monarch Money can help you stay on the same page. So if you wish you could have all of your accounts and spending in one place, you can with Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. Today's show is also brought to you by Our Lady of the Lake, the championship health partner of LSU athletics. Congratulations to the national champion LSU baseball Tigers from our friends at Our Lady of the Lake. It is quite literally champions taking care of champions at Our Lady of the Lake. And congrats to the LSU baseball team on this incredible College World Series win. Our Lady of the Lake Health is proud to be standing with LSU as their championship health partner. As they say, together we roar. This championship isn't just about LSU sports. It's about caring for all of us, creating opportunity, leading the next generation of healthcare talent right here at home. And it was so amazing to see the leadership of Our Lady of the Lake, from executives within the Franciscan Missionaries of Our Lady Health System down to some of the doctors and trainers there at Omaha, on the field at Charles Schwab after LSU won the national championship, lending their support to the Fighting Tigers. You can learn more at ololrmc.com/LSU. That's ololrmc.com/LSU. Our Lady of the Lake and LSU. Together, we roar. As we mentioned, there were 3 5-stars on campus this past weekend, and maybe the most interesting is Lamar Brown from right here in Baton Rouge at U High, quite literally goes to school on LSU's campus. There was the on-again, off-again after he visited A&M that he wouldn't take his LSU visit, then he did. So Shay Dixon joins us, and how did it go?
Yeah, they had sort of all hands on deck here. You know, it's tough to provide something new to a kid from U High who goes to school on campus and has been offered since he basically came on the football scene. But they had Mason Smith back in town. Obviously, he's in the NFL now, but he's become a bit of a mentor playing the D-line position that Lamar Brown wants to play. He was a 5-star coming out of Louisiana, so they were able to kind of talk things through beyond what the coaching staff and, fit and pitch him to stay home and NIL discussions. They still try to kind of drive home, hey, look, here's some guys that you can trust, that you're familiar with, and that went into Keelan Moses pitching in, his U High teammate. And I think one notable thing was that Jordan Gilbert was part of the weekend. And we're talking about Lamar Brown, who's got every offer coast to coast. But I think most people feel that if you were betting on where a 16, 17, 18-year-old is going to go to school, that A&M and LSU would be the two odds-on favorites here. And Jordan Gilbert is a U High kid who went to A&M, and when he had the opportunity, came back to LSU and started this past season. And I think for them to sit down together and talk things over, that's kind of an experience that, for Jordan, that can hit home with what Lamar is weighing right now. So, look, I've had my pick on Lamar to end up at LSU for a couple of years now. I'm not going to change it right now, but he does have a decision coming here in, probably 2 weeks, 14 days, something like that, if not a little more. So as the dust settles, Matt, from these wave of official visits that included Miami, Texas, unofficial visits to schools, I think we'll start to kind of get a little bit more clear picture. But I'll give LSU the edge right here, but I will absolutely acknowledge that A&M is still very much in there.
It is worth noting that Lamar Brown, playing his high school football at U High, there's going to be a lot of Fridays where they play late. He's not able to travel on Saturday, and Lamar Brown will end up at LSU football games. He will spend the lion's share this fall in Tiger Stadium. That's only going to reinforce LSU's lead for Lamar Brown. I agree with Shay. Lamar Brown told me point blank that LSU is a tough team to beat. And so until someone does, I'll continue to think that Lamar Brown is going to be a heavy LSU lead. Richard Anderson, the 5-star defensive lineman, number 1 defensive lineman in the country, was on campus as well and participated in that recruitment with Lamar Brown. And it was pretty interesting seeing a video of the two of them together and saying, like, this is going to be a problem for the SEC if they end up playing together. And what a dynamic duo that would be. Lamar Brown also tweeted a photo with Coach Kevin Peoples, the edge coach at LSU, and said the man with the plan. So LSU was all in, all hands on deck to recruit Lamar Brown. They understand why he is such a priority. The other guy, in addition to Brown and Anderson, was Tristen Keys, the number 1 receiver in the country. And he's taken visits recently to Tennessee and to Miami, and there have been words of a possible flip, but Tristen Keys has remained committed to LSU, and as Shay told us, he had someone with him that was an important decision maker as well.
The goal was really twofold. A, get him to this point and have him still committed. And when you've got, agents involved with the NIL era, 5-star receivers are about, as involved as it gets when teams go, other teams pitching them on NIL opportunities and all of that. Buzz Cook, who's Brett Favre's agent, a Hattiesburg guy, and obviously Tristan's a Hattiesburg native, has been kind of one of the people involved on the agent side of things, as someone who can help out with his recruitment. And I think when you go to Tennessee, you go to Miami, you go to A&M, you make these visits, they're going to pitch a lot of different things. And it's tough to kind of sit and wait and continue to battle over the phone and get him in for unofficial visits until you make it to that final weekend before the dead period. But the twofold goal was A, getting him there, got him there committed, and then B, having his mom there, which kind of the short and skinny of it is that he's visited LSU a ton since ninth grade, but often the Hattiesburg High coaches would bring him, they'd bring his teammates, all of that. This was him and his mom's weekend to finally kind of really get an extended look at things, her to sit down with LSU and talk things over, and by all accounts, things went very well there. So do I know if Tristen Keys 100% will sign with LSU in December? No. Do I feel better about that now that I saw him not decommit at any point this summer and then give LSU this final visit?
A lot going well for LSU, and now we wait. There is a 2-month dead period now in recruiting. The final week of July used to be open for visits. It is no longer. That's when LSU used to have the Bayou Splash. They moved it up to this past weekend for that reason. So anticipate maybe a few quiet weeks, unless if there's some players who make their announcements. But as far as visits, that's over for the next couple of months as LSU will head into this final few weeks of June into July. SEC Media Days around the bend, then they'll be in fall camp there at the beginning of August, and we'll be here for all of it. So thank you so much for making us your first listen. Hey, now for your second listen, you can go check out the portal. Brian Smith has the latest rumors, portal entry, signings. Be the most informed fan on the rapid changes of the college football landscape. Find the portal on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you are on podcast, of course, please subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Rate us, leave a review. If you're on YouTube, please smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell so you're notified whenever we post a new video. And be sure to let a friend know that if they love the Tigers, we got you right here for Locked On LSU, carrying you through the remainder of the summer all the way up to football season and through it. We're fired up to have you along for the ride. Of course, it is Locked On LSU, your team every day.